He ruled 20 states with an iron fist. Oil flowing through pipelines from Texas to New York, all because Kang Jinwoo allowed it. Governors returned his calls. Senators feared his silence. Rivals disappeared before they became problems. But power couldn't explain the one thing that kept him awake at night. Why did his waitress speak perfect French when she thought no one was listening? For 42 days, he watched her. Amara Jenkins, a woman who moved through his exclusive Manhattan restaurant like she was invisible, serving $1,000 wine with hands that trembled slightly, eyes that absorbed everything while revealing nothing. Then classified documents about his European expansion went missing. The same night Amara left the restaurant carrying a folder she didn't bring in. Jinwoo had built his empire on one unbreakable rule: trust is weakness, and everyone has a price. So he followed her into the rain-soaked streets of Brooklyn, gun loaded, convinced she'd sold him out to his rivals. What he discovered didn't just shock him. It destroyed everything he thought he knew about power, loyalty, and love. Because the woman he was ready to kill for betrayal was about to teach him that the most dangerous weapon isn't a bullet. It's a heart that refuses to stay closed. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button right now. Because in about 45 minutes, you're going to be emotionally wrecked, and I need you to remember to come back for more stories that hit this deep. Don't wait until you're crying. Subscribe now. Kang Jinwoo owned Monday through Sunday in 20 American states, and he'd never once felt powerful because of it. At 42, he controlled oil pipelines that heated homes from Texas to Massachusetts, gambling operations that moved 8 figures weekly, and real estate portfolios that made senators return his calls within the hour. His empire wasn't built on luck or inheritance. It was constructed through 3 decades of reading people like balance sheets and trusting his paranoia more than his instincts. Every contract triple-checked. Every associate vetted by 4 different sources. Every conversation recorded. Every loyalty tested. Every potential weakness eliminated before it became a liability. Victor Han, his right hand for 15 years, once told him, "Boss, you've built a fortress so secure that even you can't get out." Jinwoo had laughed, poured expensive whiskey neither of them could taste anymore, and said nothing. Because Victor was right, and they both knew it. The sovereign occupied the 63rd floor of a Manhattan skyscraper Jinwoo owned, but never claimed publicly. Michelin-starred chef. Wine list that required 6 figures minimum to access. Clientele that included everyone who mattered and no one who didn't. It wasn't a restaurant. It was a boardroom disguised as fine dining, where deals worth more than small countries happened over truffle risotto and 1947 Chateau d'Yquem. Jinwoo sat in his usual corner, back to the wall, eyes on every entrance, phone within reach, reviewing acquisition documents, while a California governor's aide nervously explained why their renewable energy proposal needed reconsideration. That's when he noticed her. Not notice like men notice beautiful women in restaurants. Notice like predators notice movement in tall grass. Amara Jenkins moved through the sovereign like she'd perfected the art of occupying space without claiming it. Black woman, late 20s, server's uniform fitted precisely, hair pulled back with geometric precision. She poured wine with hands that trembled microscopically, not from nerves, Jinwoo assessed, but from something else. Exhaustion maybe. Or fear wearing a professional smile. But her eyes. Her eyes absorbed everything while revealing nothing. Calculated distances between tables. Tracked conversation patterns. Memorized faces with the efficiency of someone trained to survive by staying invisible. Jinwoo had built an empire on reading people, and Amara Jenkins was a book written in a language he couldn't quite translate. "Victor," he said quietly, not looking away from where Amara efficiently cleared a table. "How long has she worked here?" Victor followed his gaze, frowned slightly. "For months." "Excellent references." Background check came clean. "Why?" Jinwoo watched Amara navigate between power brokers like she was defusing bombs, precise, careful, aware that one wrong move meant detonation. "No reason," he lied. Victor's frown deepened, because in 15 years he'd learned that when Jinwoo said no reason, it meant he'd already identified a pattern everyone else had missed. Outside, Manhattan glittered with possibility and threat. Inside the Sovereign, King Jinwoo watched his waitress serve wine to men who controlled nations and wondered why someone that intelligent was working so hard to be invisible. He wouldn't wonder for long. 3 weeks later, Jinwoo hosted the meeting that would unravel everything. European expansion required European partners, which meant the private dining room at the Sovereign filled with men who spoke 4 languages and trusted no one. Laurent Beaumont from Paris, Klaus Weber from Berlin, Antonio Russo from Milan. All of them circling Jinwoo's proposal like sharks evaluating whether he was predator or prey. The conversation shifted seamlessly between English, French, and German, a linguistic dance designed to exclude anyone without the right education. Jinwoo's French was flawless, sharpened during 2 years at Sciences but before his father's assassination called him home to blood and balance sheets. Les families locales n'y couperont jamais, Laurent said, leaning back with calculated skepticism. Not without significant incentive. Jinwoo smiled the smile that made rivals reconsider their life choices. L'argent parle touts les langues. I've never met a family that couldn't be convinced. That's when Amara entered with the wine. She moved with her usual invisible efficiency, setting down glasses with hands that never rattled crystal, never interrupted conversation. Professional. Forgettable. Except Jinwoo caught it, the half-second freeze when Laurent mentioned the Paris operations. The microscopic tightening around her eyes when Klaus detailed the Berlin territory disputes. She understood French. Not phrases. Not tourist basics. She understood the implications. Jinwoo's entire body went cold while his face remained perfectly pleasant. He continued the meeting, closed the deal, shook hands with men who'd just agreed to help him control 10 European cities. But his mind was already 3 moves ahead, calculating probabilities and threat assessments. At 11:47 p.m., Victor called. "We have a problem." Jinwoo stood at his penthouse window, watching Manhattan pretend to sleep. "Tell me." "The Brussels documents, the ones outlining our local contacts, financial structures, political leverage, they're gone. Not misplaced. Gone. Security footage? Pulled it already." Amara Jenkins was the last person in that private dining room. 17 minutes after your meeting ended, she returned, said she'd forgotten to collect dessert menus. "Cameras show her near the sideboard where you left your briefcase." Jinwoo's reflection stared back from the glass, a man who'd spent 3 decades being right about people betraying him. "Background check," he said quietly. "Already running deep dive." "Boss," Victor hesitated, which he never did. "Initial findings show inconsistencies. Her references check out superficially, but the employment timeline has gaps. And her address is registered to a building that was condemned 8 months ago. Education. Claims high school diploma, some community college. But I'm getting anomalies in the records." Jinwoo closed his eyes. The paranoia that had kept him alive was screaming that Amara Jenkins was either FBI, rival gang intelligence, or something worse. But there was something else, something quieter and infinitely more dangerous. Curiosity. Because women who understood international relations discussions conducted in French didn't serve wine for minimum wage unless they were running from something or running toward something. "Don't touch her yet," Jinwoo said. "I want to know what she does with those documents." "Boss, if she's..." "I know what she might be, Victor. That's why I'm going to follow her myself." He hung up before Victor could argue. Outside, the city glittered with secrets. Inside, King Jinwoo loaded his gun and prepared to discover which kind Amara Jenkins was hiding. The rain started at 9:33 p.m., turning Manhattan into noir film footage, all neon reflections and blurred edges where certainty used to be. Jinwoo watched from his Mercedes as Amara exited the Sovereign staff entrance, hood pulled up, moving with purpose through streets that swallowed people whole. She carried nothing visible, but that meant nothing. Information fit on drives smaller than fingernails now. He followed 3 cars back, professional distance, gun weighted in his jacket pocket. His mind ran probabilities. FBI safe house in Queens, rival gang meeting in the Bronx, dead drop in Central Park. Every scenario ended with Amara Jenkins revealed as exactly what his paranoia insisted she was, a threat that needed eliminating. She took the 2 train to Brooklyn. Jinwoo's phone buzzed. Victor, asterisk tracking her phone signal. Heading toward bed Stewie. Want backup? Asterisk. No, he typed back. Stay ready. The neighborhood shifted from Manhattan's polished steel to Brooklyn's honest brick. Buildings that remembered better decades. Streets where survival was a daily negotiation, not a guarantee. Amara walked 6 blocks, checking her surroundings with trained awareness, until she stopped at a building that looked like optimism fighting a losing battle against entropy. Hand-painted sign, Riverside Community Center. All welcome. Jinwoo's certainty fractured slightly. FBI didn't meet at community centers. Rival gangs didn't conduct intelligence handoffs at nonprofits with kindergarten artwork in the windows. He waited 15 minutes, then entered. The interior smelled like industrial cleaner fighting mold and losing. Fluorescent lights buzzed. Vinyl floors cracked like spider webs. But the walls exploded with children's art, crayon flags from countries Jinwoo's operations had touched, handprints in every shade of human possibility. Voices from the back room. Jinwoo moved silently, every instinct screaming this was a trap, this was misdirection, this was... Now, who can tell me what diplomatic immunity means? Amara's voice, but different. Animated. Alive in ways the sovereign never allowed. Jinwoo positioned himself where he could see without being seen. 20 children, ages 7 to 14, sat in a semicircle around Amara. She'd shed her server's uniform for jeans and a Howard University sweatshirt, hair loose, face transformed by something Jinwoo hadn't seen in 3 decades. Genuine joy. It means ambassadors can't get arrested even if they park illegally, a boy with a thick accent offered. Amara laughed real unguarded. Close. It's more complicated, but yes, that's part of it. Diplomatic immunity exists because countries need to trust their representatives can work without fear. But she leaned forward conspiratorially. Does that mean it's always used ethically? A small girl raised her hand, maybe 8 years old, blonde braids, Russian features. My mama says powerful people use rules to protect themselves, not others. Something crossed Amara's face. Sadness wearing a gentle smile. Your mama is very wise, Katia. And that's exactly why we study this, so we understand how power works and maybe someday, how to make it work better. Jinwoo stood in the doorway, gun in his pocket feeling heavier by the second, watching his waitress teach international relations to immigrant children in a building held together by hope and duct tape. This wasn't FBI. This wasn't rival intelligence. This was a woman with an education she'd buried, teaching children the language of power in a neighborhood power forgot. The documents weren't in evidence bags or rival hands. They were probably recycled or still hidden, stolen by a woman trying to figure out if Jinwoo's European expansion would hurt families like these. For the first time in 30 years, King Jinwoo's paranoia didn't have an answer. Only a question that terrified him more than any threat. What if I was wrong? Jinwoo waited until the children left, their laughter echoing down hallways that had probably never heard his kind of silence. Amara was wiping down tables when he stepped from the shadows. She didn't scream. Didn't run. Just went very still, cloth frozen mid-wipe, before turning to face him with the expression of someone who'd been expecting this conversation for weeks. Mr. Kong. Her voice was steady. Resigned. I wondered when you'd stop watching and start asking. You speak French. Not a question. An accusation wrapped in curiosity. Yes. You have a degree. International relations, if I'm guessing correctly based on what I just witnessed. Spelman College. Full scholarship. Graduated summa cum laude. She said it without pride, just facts presented for judgment. You want to know why I'm serving wine instead of working at the UN? Jinwoo moved closer, hand still near his gun, old habits dying hard. I want to know why you stole my documents. I didn't steal them. Amara met his eyes without flinching. I photographed 2 pages on my phone, then put them back. You probably found them exactly where you left them, just assumed they were gone because your paranoia needed a villain. The accuracy of that hit harder than any threat. Why? Because I heard you planning expansion into Paris, Brussels, Berlin. I speak French. I studied European political structures. And I needed to know, her voice cracked slightly. If you were the kind of man who destroys families to build empires, or if there was something else underneath all that control. And? Jinwoo asked, genuinely curious now. What did those documents tell you? That you're more complicated than I wanted you to be. Amara set down the cloth. My mother died 2 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. She had good insurance until she didn't. Medical debt doesn't care about your degree or your potential, it just swallows you whole. I needed invisible work. Service jobs don't run background checks that trigger creditor alerts. Don't require references that lead to garnished wages. You're hiding. I'm surviving. There's a difference. She gestured at the empty room. These children, half of them come from countries where men like you control everything. Where power means taking, not building. I teach them so they understand how the game works. So maybe they don't end up crushed by it. Jinwoo felt something crack in his chest, the same armor that had kept him alive and alone for 3 decades. You think I crush people? I think you've spent so long trusting no one that you've forgotten what it feels like to be trusted. Amara stepped closer, eliminating the predator-prey distance. I think you're exhausted. I think that empire you built is a prison, and you can't remember why you wanted it in the first place. The truth of it stole his breath. I've spent 30 years trusting no one, Jinwoo heard himself say. I'm tired. Amara's expression softened into something that looked dangerously like understanding. Then stop, she said quietly. Trust me. Why would I do that? Because I just told you I photographed your documents, admitted I speak French, and I'm still standing here waiting for you to decide if I'm human or threat. That's either stupidity or honesty. She paused. And I didn't get a full ride to Spellman by being stupid. Jinwoo laughed, actual laughter, rusty from disuse. Outside, rain hammered Brooklyn like it was trying to wash something clean. Inside, 2 people who'd perfected invisibility as survival stood in a community center held together by hope and accidentally saw each other. Jinwoo started showing up on Tuesdays and Thursdays, always with an excuse that fooled neither of them. Just ensuring my investment is sound, he'd say, referencing the anonymous donation that had somehow paid for new heating, updated textbooks, and a computer lab that made the children scream with joy. Amara would smile that knowing smile. Of course, Mr. Kong. Very prudent. Jinwoo, he corrected for the 4th week in a row. Jinwoo, she finally conceded, and the sound of his name in her voice did dangerous things to his carefully constructed walls. They fell into rhythm accidentally, conversations that started about Voltaire and ended at 2 a.m., dissecting whether power corrupted or simply revealed. Amara teaching him to make her mother's jerk chicken in the center's tiny kitchen, laughing when he measured spices with the same precision he applied to hostile takeovers. You can't control flavor, she said, adding seasoning by instinct and inherited memory. Sometimes you just have to trust it'll work out. Jinwoo, who'd spent 3 decades controlling everything, found himself trusting her. Victor noticed first. You're compromised, he said flatly, finding Jinwoo at the penthouse reviewing community center expansion plans instead of territory maps. That woman has you distracted, vulnerable. This is exactly how empires fall. Then let it fall, Jinwoo said, and mend it. Victor left looking like he'd watched his boss sign his own death warrant. Meanwhile, Sienna cornered Amara at their shared apartment, arms crossed, wearing the expression of a best friend who'd seen this tragedy before. Girl, what are you doing? Powerful men don't love women like us, they collect us. And when they're done, we're the ones left destroyed. He's different, Amara whispered, knowing how naive it sounded. They're never different. They're just better at making you believe they are. But Sienna hadn't seen Jinwoo last Thursday, sitting cross-legged on the floor with Claudia and 6 other children, explaining that democracy meant everyone's voice mattered, even when power said otherwise. Hadn't heard the wonder in his voice when he asked Amara afterward, do they actually believe that? That their voices matter? They do when I teach them, Amara had said. Jinwoo had looked at her like she'd revealed the formula for turning lead into gold. You're giving them something I've spent 42 years trying to take from people, hope that the system can work for them instead of against them. That's when Amara knew she was gone. Completely, devastatingly in love. The moment Jinwoo knew came 2 weeks later, watching Amara explain checks and balances to children whose home countries had neither. The passion in her voice, the way she made them believe participation mattered more than power. He'd built an empire to prove he mattered. Conquered 20 states to silence the voice that said he wasn't enough. But sitting in that community center, watching Amara teach children that change was possible, Jinwoo felt something he'd never experienced in 30 years of winning. He mattered not because of what he controlled, but because she saw him. The man underneath the empire. The boy who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten what sunlight felt like. I built everything to prove I existed, he told her that night, rain drumming against windows. But next to you, I finally feel like I do. Amara kissed him then, soft, certain, catastrophic. Neither of them knew the timer had already started. Elena Volkov walked into the Sovereign like she owned gravity itself. Russian mob royalty, controller of 10 European cities, wearing a smile that had buried more men than most wars. She slid into the seat across from Jinwoo without invitation, ordering wine in perfect English wrapped in calculated menace. Your European expansion, she said, skipping pleasantries entirely. Ambitious. Perhaps too ambitious for someone so distracted. Jinwoo's expression revealed nothing. I'm never distracted. No? Elena's smile sharpened. Then you've already vetted your waitress thoroughly. Amara Jenkins. Lovely girl. Smart. Though I wonder if you know exactly how smart. Every instinct Jinwoo possessed screamed threat assessment, but he kept his voice level. If you have something to say, say it. Just curious how a man who trusts no one suddenly trusts a woman he knows nothing about. She stood, smoothing her dress. The documents you thought were missing? Check your safe again. Sometimes things return when we're not looking. She left before Jinwoo could respond. He found the documents exactly where Elena said, pages he'd torn apart his organization searching for, now perfectly filed as if they'd never left. With a note in handwriting that wasn't Amara's, ask your waitress what else she's hiding. The same day, FBI agent Morrison caught Amara, leaving the community center. Miss Jenkins. Or should I say Ms. Volkov Jenkins? He flashed credentials, watching her face carefully. We know about your connection to Jinwoo. We know about the photographs you took. And we know you're researching his financial structures. Amara's blood turned to ice. I don't know what you're. We can protect you. Full immunity. Witness protection, a future that doesn't end with you buried in the Hudson. Morrison stepped closer. Help us take him down, or we assume you're complicit in 23 federal crimes. Your choice. He left her his card and 48 hours to decide. Victor found the research that night, Amara's laptop history showing deep dives into Jinwoo's shell corporations, offshore accounts, political connections. Not casual curiosity. Professional intelligence gathering. He confronted Jinwoo at midnight, evidence printed and damning. She's been studying your entire operation. Either she's FBI, she's working for Elena, or she's planning her own play. Victor's voice cracked slightly, 15 years of loyalty watching his boss walk toward a cliff. You taught me never to ignore patterns. This is a pattern. Jinwoo stared at the papers, seeing Amara's digital footprints all over his empire's skeleton. 3 decades of paranoia screamed that everyone betrays, that trust is how powerful men die, that Amara Jenkins was exactly the threat his instincts always promised. But then he remembered her teaching Katia about democracy. Her mother's medical debt. The way she looked at him like he was human instead of weapon. Set up a meeting, Jinwoo said quietly. I want to hear it from her. Amara came to his penthouse at 2 a.m., exhausted and terrified, finding Jinwoo standing at windows overlooking his empire. Victor thinks you're a threat. Elena thinks you're my weakness. The FBI thinks you're leverage. He turned to face her. Tell me what you actually are. Scared, Amara whispered. Researching you because I needed to understand what I was falling for. Photographing documents because I was terrified you'd hurt people. And now trapped between the FBI threatening prison, your second-in-command ready to kill me, and a Russian mob boss who somehow knows my name. Are you working for Elena? No. The FBI? Not willingly. They approached me today. Jinwoo absorbed this, Decades of training warring with weeks of feeling human. I've spent 30 years being right about people betraying me, he said finally. I'd rather be wrong about you. Amara's tears came fast and relieved. You're sure? No. But I'm choosing you anyway. Outside, 3 enemies circled. Inside, 2 people who'd learned survival meant isolation decided trust was worth the risk. They had no idea the cost would be everything. Jinwoo took her to the Catskills on a Thursday, his private golf resort that existed in tax documents, but rarely saw him in person. Neutral territory, he explained, driving through autumn that looked like the world was on fire in the best way. No empire. No threats. Just us. Amara watched mountains roll past, trying to memorize this feeling, Jinwoo's hand in hers, Morrison's card burning a hole in her pocket, Elena's threats echoing in her skull, and the truth she couldn't speak lodged in her throat like a bullet. The resort was obscenely beautiful, all glass and timber, overlooking valleys that had never heard of organized crime or federal indictments. They spent the afternoon like normal people who'd never held guns or buried secrets, walking trails that smelled like pine and possibility. You could do this legitimately, Amara said, watching sunset paint the mountains gold. Real estate development. Renewable energy. You have the infrastructure, the capital, the connections. Jinwoo smiled sadly. You think men like me get to retire into legitimacy? I think men like you convince themselves they don't deserve to. That night, over wine neither of them tasted, they built futures they'd never inhabit. Jinwoo offering to fund her graduate school, Columbia has an excellent international relations program. You could teach policy instead of just explaining it to children. Amara encouraging him toward clean business. Imagine building something that doesn't require looking over your shoulder, where success doesn't mean someone else's destruction. They were playing pretend, and both knew it. At midnight, Jinwoo led her to the terrace overlooking darkness, interrupted by stars. I'm not going to propose marriage, he said, and Amara laughed despite the tears already forming. We both know I'm not built for traditional anything, but I want to offer you something else. He took her hands, no ring, just skin and scars and absolute certainty. I'm tired of controlling empires. Tired of power that isolates instead of connects. Tired of being right about people betraying me. His voice cracked. Help me build something that matters. Not territory or influence or fear. Something that looks like what you've built at that community center. Something that makes people's lives better instead of just making me richer. Amara closed her eyes against the guilt that was killing her. She should tell him. Should confess that Elena was her aunt, that this entire connection started as manipulation, that Morrison had her cornered and Elena had her trapped, and she was the weapon everyone had been sharpening for 3 years. But Jinwoo was looking at her like she was salvation instead of sabotage. Yes, she whispered, the word both truth and betrayal. Yes to all of it. They made love that night with the desperation of people who knew perfection was temporary. Jinwoo held her like she was the only real thing in a world built on lies. Amara memorized every moment, his heartbeat, his whispered confessions, the way he finally looked peaceful. Dawn came too fast. By sunset, their world would be ash. But for one perfect night in the Catskills, Kang Jinwoo and Amara Jenkins pretended love was enough to rewrite endings already written in blood. It wasn't. It never is. But God, it was beautiful trying. The call came at 3:47 p.m. while Jinwoo was reviewing plans to legitimize his Texas oil operations. Unknown number. Video call. Elena Volkov's face filled the screen, and behind her, Amara and Katya, bound to chairs in a room Jinwoo didn't recognize. Both alive. Both terrified. Before you threaten me, Elena said pleasantly, understand that I have 12 men in that building, for escape routes and absolutely nothing to lose. You, however, she gestured at Amara, have everything to lose. Jinwoo's voice came out glacial. What do you want? Your empire. All 20 states. Every operation, every contact, every politician you own, every business you control. You have 48 hours to transfer everything, publicly, legally, irrevocably, to my organization. Then you disappear. Fake your death. Leave the country. I don't care. Just cease to exist. And if I refuse? Elena's smile could have frozen oceans. Then I kill the woman you love and the child she's been teaching. 1 bullet each. You'll receive the video within the hour. The screen went black. Jinwoo stood frozen for 17 seconds, a lifetime in crisis calculation, before his world exploded into motion. Victor burst in, already mobilized. I've got 30 men ready. We can hit 6 possible locations simultaneously, extract them both. Casualties. Jinwoo interrupted. Unknown. Could be minimal. Could be. Victor stopped. Does it matter? To Amara it would. FBI agent Morrison arrived 40 minutes later, somehow knowing everything. Testify against Elena's European operations. Full immunity for you and Ms. Jenkins. Witness protection, new identities. She never has to know about your crimes. You both disappear, together, alive, clean. I'd be betraying every associate I have. 50 men would die in retaliation before the week ended. Morrison shrugged. 50 criminals, or the woman you love. Choose. Victor cornered him at midnight. Violence built your empire. Use it to save her. We storm wherever Elena's holding them, extract Amara and the girl, damn the casualties. It's what you would have done 3 months ago. 3 months ago I didn't love her, Jinwoo said quietly. If I save her through violence, if people die because I chose her life over theirs, she'll hate me for it. She'll look at me and see exactly the monster she was trying to teach those children to resist. So you surrender? Give Elena everything you built? 30 years of work erased. Jinwoo stared at Manhattan's skyline, 20 states of power that suddenly meant nothing measured against Amara's heartbeat. The math was impossible. Violence made him the monster. Testimony made him a traitor. Surrender made him powerless. Unless powerlessness was the point. At 9 a.m., Jinwoo held a press conference that made international news. Effective immediately, I'm transferring all operations, assets, and territories to Elena Volkov's organization. This is voluntary, legal, and permanent. I'm retiring from all business activities. Morrison appeared before he'd left the building. You're still going to prison. Surrender doesn't erase your crimes. I know, Jinwoo said. But Amara goes free. That's not how this works. Make it work. Victor looked devastated. Boss, you just gave away an empire. Jinwoo smiled, sad, certain, finally free. I built power to survive. I'm giving it up to live. By sunset, Amara and Katya were released. By midnight, Jinwoo was in federal custody. The empire he'd spent 3 decades building belonged to the woman who'd weaponized love. And somehow, impossibly, he'd do it again. Federal Correctional Institution Otisville arrived in shades of gray Jinwoo had never experienced, not the sophisticated gray of expensive suits, but the gray of dreams dying slowly under fluorescent lights. 30 days in, the first letter arrived. Elena's handwriting, elegant as a knife to the throat. Dear Jinwoo. Asterisk, by now you've had time to reflect on your choices. How noble you must feel, sacrificing everything for love. But I thought you deserved to know exactly what you sacrificed it for, asterisk. Asterisk Amara Volkov Jenkins. My brother's daughter. Placed at the Sovereign 3 years ago as a long-term investment. The fake references, the manufactured background, the coincidental job application, all carefully constructed. Asterisk. Asterisk her international relations degree? Real. Her mother's medical debt? Real. Her need to stay invisible? Real. But I made her an offer. Help me destroy you, and I'd clear every penny of her debt. Make you fall in love. Gather intelligence. Wait for my signal. Asterisk. Asterisk the missing documents that started your obsession? I took them, then had her find them later to build your trust. The community center volunteer work? Genuine. Amara insisted on it, said she needed something real to stay sane. Even I didn't know she was teaching my daughter. That part was poetic accident. Asterisk. Asterisk she was perfect. Patient. 3 years of investment about to yield 20 states worth of return. Asterisk. Then she made the mistake of actually falling for you. Asterisk enjoy prison, Jinwoo. You traded an empire for a woman who was designed to destroy you. I'd call it tragic, but really, it's just efficient. Asterisk. Elena. Jinwoo read it 17 times before his hands stopped shaking. 3 years. Every moment calculated. Every conversation rehearsed. The woman who taught him to feel was the weapon that cost him everything. The second letter arrived 2 days later. Amara's handwriting, shaky and desperate. Jinwoo. Asterisk, by now Elena has told you the truth. I won't insult you by denying it. Asterisk. Asterisk, yes, I'm her niece. Yes, she placed me at the Sovereign. Yes, I was supposed to gather intelligence and stay emotionally detached. My mother's medical debt was real, $340,000 that Elena paid off in exchange for 3 years of my life. Asterisk. Asterisk, I was supposed to be a sleeper agent. Watch you. Report back. Wait. Asterisk. Asterisk, but then you followed me to the community center and didn't expose me. You kept showing up, not to threaten, but to listen. You saw me. Not as a threat or an asset or even a woman, but as someone who'd buried her potential under survival. Asterisk. Asterisk, the research Victor found? I was trying to find proof of Elena's manipulation to warn you. But she moved first. Asterisk. Asterisk, I tried, Jinwoo. I swear I tried to protect you. But I'm the weapon that destroyed you anyway. Asterisk. Asterisk, the love was real. Every conversation, every moment, every time I looked at you and saw the man underneath the empire, all real. I fell in love with you despite orders, despite debt, despite knowing it would cost me everything. Asterisk. Asterisk, you deserve to hate me. But I needed you to know. The betrayal was planned. The love was the accident. Asterisk. I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it. Amara. She came on a Thursday, 63 days into his sentence. Jinwoo sat across from her in the visiting room, plexiglass between them, and for 3 minutes neither spoke. She looked thinner. Haunted. Like she'd been crying for 2 months straight. Why did you come? He finally asked. Because you deserve the truth in person, not from letters. I know the truth. You were Elena's weapon. Yes. And you fell in love with the target. Yes. Tears streaming now, unstoppable. Jinwoo leaned forward. Was any of it real? The conversations about your mother? The way you looked at me? The night you said power isn't holding the world, it's having the courage to let go. All of it. Amara's voice broke completely. Every single moment. I was supposed to make you care so you'd be vulnerable. But I'm the one who ended up destroyed. I learned what it's like to be truly seen, and I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I betrayed that. Does Elena know you loved me? Yes. She said it makes me weak. That I failed the family. Jinwoo almost smiled, sad, broken, still somehow tender. She's wrong. Loving someone despite orders not to? That's the strongest thing I've ever seen. You built an empire, Amara whispered. You controlled 20 states. And you gave it all up for me. I'd do it again. Why? Because for 42 years, I was a weapon. Then you looked at me like I was a man. Like I was worth something beyond what I could control or destroy. He pressed his hand against the plexiglass. I wanted to be worthy of how you saw me. Amara mirrored his gesture, palm to palm with only glass between them. You were. You are. What happens now? Elena won. She has everything, your empire, your contacts, your territories. You're here for 20 years minimum. Morrison couldn't touch her because you refused to testify. She closed her eyes. And I have to live knowing I destroyed the only good thing I ever touched. You didn't destroy me, Amara. You saved me. I just wish I'd understood that before I lost you. You didn't lose me. I'm right here. Jinwoo shook his head gently. No. The woman I loved was free. You're trapped in a cage Elena built. And I can't save you from inside my own. The guard called time. Amara stood slowly, memorizing his face, softer now without cruelty, eyes holding hers like she was the last beautiful thing in the world. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know. So am I. For what? For not trusting you sooner. For letting paranoia win until it was too late. He paused. And for still loving you, even now. Even knowing everything. Amara walked away, each step heavier than the last. At the door, she turned back once. Jinwoo was still there, hand against the plexiglass, watching her leave. Outside, Sienna waited in the car, took one look at Amara's face and pulled her into a hug as she finally broke completely. "That's worse than hate, isn't it?" Sienna whispered. "So much worse." In Manhattan, Elena stood at windows overlooking Jinwoo's former empire, victory tasting strangely hollow because her perfect weapon had fallen in love and become useless. At the Riverside Community Center, children asked where Miss Amara was, where Mr. Jin went, why they stopped coming. No one had good answers. And in his cell, Kong Jinwoo stared at the ceiling, thinking about a woman sent to destroy him who did, just not the way anyone expected. He destroyed her right back. Maybe that's what love is when it collides with power, mutual devastation. Beautiful, inevitable, and utterly complete. So, what did you just witness? A story about power? No. A story about betrayal? Close, but not quite. This was a story about the cost of being fully known. Jinwoo spent 42 years building walls so high that no one could touch him. Then Amara scaled every single one, not with weapons, but with the simple, radical act of seeing him as human. And when she betrayed him because love and duty collided and duty was there first, it didn't just cost him an empire. It cost him the one thing he'd finally learned to want, to be loved for who he was, not what he controlled. The cruelest plot twist wasn't that Amara was Elena's weapon. It was that her love was real. And now they both have to live with that. If this story broke something in you, if you're sitting there feeling like your chest is caving in, then do me a favor. Hit that like button right now. Seriously, your thumb is right there. Let me know this story hit as hard as I intended. Subscribe if you haven't already, because I've got more stories that will emotionally wreck you in the best way possible, and you don't want to miss them. Drop a comment below. Tell me, was Jinwoo right to trust Amara? Would you have made the same choice? Or are you team paranoia keeps you alive? I want to hear your thoughts. And share this with someone who needs to understand that some stories don't have happy endings, they have true ones. Because here's what we learned today. Power is easy. Love is the dangerous game. Some people learn that and walk away. Others learn it and realize walking away is no longer an option. Jinwoo and Amara learned it too late to save each other. But maybe, just maybe, not too late to understand what they lost. Now go subscribe, comment, like, and I'll see you in the next story that makes you question everything you thought you knew about love and power.